Hey everyone, this is Caly. Thanks so much for being here with me today. I'm creating a lilac clusters card, and my card today is a 5x7 card because it accommodates all these different clusters to create a beautiful bouquet of them. So we are using some embossing folders from the latest Simon Says stamp release. This is the Lilac Clusters embossing folder. It's kind of a mouthful. So I am going to emboss two panels, and I'll show you how I add color to these using some ink and blending brushes. I have the round detail blending brush here, and at first I'm using lilac ink. It's a lighter purple. For this first color, I'm just adding a single layer of color, and you can see that the raised areas really pick up the color a little bit more, so you'll see some depth and dimension pop through where those little textured petals are. So this is a great way to add ink, and you want to use a really light hand because you don't want the ink to get into the crevices too much. You kind of want the ink to pick itself up on the raised areas. I'm using amethyst ink now. It's a little bit darker, so you'll see it really intensify on the embossed areas of this image. For the third color, I'm using taffy ink. It's kind of a purplish pink color, so it's going to add a bit more shading and a bit more color. It just creates more interest for the lilac cluster itself. For this color, I'm not adding a layer of the color evenly. I'm adding it kind of more splotchy just so there's more texture and more body to these lilac clusters. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to add some green. But you'll see later on that I do end up cutting up the lilac clusters just to get the clusters itself only. So a lot of the green there will be eliminated. And to give the stem some color, it's very easy to add color to more detailed areas like this using a Copic marker. So I'm using a YG09 marker, and I'm just looking for the stems on the lilac cluster and just adding those Copic details to those. And here I am initially just planning on cutting the tops off of this so that I can create a lilac cluster using the original embossed design, but I decided to go ahead and cut around the entire cluster so that I can get 4 clusters and arrange my own bouquet of them. There's some green at the bottom there from where I cut the foliage, so we're going to go ahead and take that green and kind of go around the clusters to add some green stems and leaves all around the clusters, and that will blend in with the background that we ink blend later too. Okay, so at this point the lilac clusters look pretty good, but I decided I wanted a bit more contrast, so I went in with some marine ink to add some splotches of blue on the lilac clusters too. As you can see, it creates a lot more depth and dimension on these lilac clusters. And I'm also going to use this blue later on, so we'll make our card a little bit more cohesive with the butterfly that I'm going to use. Now, to add some foliage back to those lilac clusters, I'm die cutting some windswept leaves. I'm using some green leaf cardstock, and then I'll ink blend with pine ink to give it a bit more shading and dimension like I did on the lilac clusters, except with just a dark green color. So I'll do that with all of these leaf stems, and when I'm done, I can go ahead and set them aside and work on a background so that we can create our cluster arrangement. Okay, so as I mentioned before, this is going to be a 5x7 card to accommodate those large lilac clusters. On this panel, I'm going to go ahead and ink blend some more Fairway ink. That's going to give our background a little bit of a glow, and it'll kind of coordinate with the greenery that I also ink blended around the lavender clusters earlier. Now that the background is ink blended, I'm going to go ahead and kind of roughly eyeball and arrange my bouquet, and then I'll go ahead and start adhering things down. I'm going to start off with some liquid adhesive and then work to a low profile 3D foam square so that I can go ahead and adhere the upper layers of my clusters to add dimension and to accommodate for all of the embossed areas of these images. And that will create a realistic feel to the way they look and the depth that they provide with a little bit of dimension. So I'm adding all of my images and holding everything down with a clear acrylic block because we want all of those debossed areas on the back side to cling itself to our background. So I just want to make sure that everything stays down and is secured well. This last cluster is adhered down with a combination of liquid adhesive and 3D foam square to accommodate for the differing heights. Alright, so now we can go ahead and move on to the foliage that I die cut and embossed. I'm going to go ahead and trim this large stem here so that I can neatly tuck it in behind the lavender clusters in the back so that it's not extending too high up and I don't need to do a lot of tucking. Okay, so I'll go ahead and finish working my way around using all of these stems up and just tucking them or trimming them if I need to and arranging it so that I have a full bouquet of lilac clusters with foliage. At this point, I wanted to add some white paint splatters all over my panel. I have some acrylic white paint and I just added a drop of it to an acrylic block, and then I spritzed it twice with some water to get a good consistency for splattering, and I'll splatter my entire panel. And while that's drying, we're going to work on a butterfly. This is another new embossing folder that comes with a coordinating die from this latest release, and it's called Fantasy Butterflies. A single butterfly for my card. I'm going to go ahead and die cut the butterfly first, and then choosing which butterfly I want from the embossing folder, I'll overlay that cardstock over the butterfly that I want to emboss and then run that through my die cutting machine. So now I have a perfectly embossed little butterfly here, and I'm going to add this marine color to the butterfly. This is the same blue ink that I used on my lilac clusters, and I always think that blue butterflies are so pretty. I actually used the same color on a card for the release, and I wanted to duplicate that butterfly for this card as well. So I ink blended with marine ink, and as you can see, fading to a lighter blue at the center really makes this butterfly pop. And then for the details on the butterfly, on the raised areas, I'm using a Copic marker, and I'm carefully only coloring the raised areas on this butterfly. So it adds a really beautiful monarch detail on this butterfly. And then for the body, I did die cut it in white. You could die cut in black if you don't want to color the body of the butterfly, but I went ahead and colored it as well because I already had my black marker out. To adhere the butterfly, I am using glue only on the body. So I wanted the butterfly wings to be able to fold up for some additional dimension and detail. So the body is really what's going to hold down this butterfly. And while that's drying, I went ahead and trimmed a sentiment strip from the Thinking of You sentiment strip set, and I colored the core around the cut areas with my black Copic marker to hide that white core of the cardstock. And then I'll use my T-ruler to make sure that that's nice and straight on my card, and then that finishes it up. I just need to adhere this to a card base, and I should have mentioned before that I did trim down my background panel to a 4.5 by 6.5 inch panel to mat a 5 by 7 card base. And that finishes my card for today. I hope you picked up some tips and tricks along the way on how to add color to embossed images and to create lots of dimension with color. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you're interested in any of the products that I used today, be sure to check out the links below, as well as on the coordinating blog post where everything will be listed for your convenience. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye.